In June 1944, the tranquil streets of Caen, a city rich in history and culture, became the epicenter of one of World War II's most brutal and fiercely contested battles. Situated in the heart of Normandy, Caen's strategic importance made it a coveted prize for both the Allied and Axis forces. What ensued was a clash of titanic proportions, marking the first time in Western Europe that both sides would fight with an intensity and brutality reminiscent of the Eastern Front. The Allies, having landed on the beaches of Normandy, aimed to capture Caen quickly to establish a strong foothold and push further into occupied France. However, the German forces, under the command of skilled and tenacious leaders, were determined to hold the city at all costs. Much of the fighting in Caen mirrored the savage conflicts of the Eastern Front. The combatants on both sides, driven by a mix of strategic necessity and sheer survival, often stopped taking prisoners. This brutal reality underscored the stakes and the savagery of the battle. Join us as we journey into the heart of the Battle of Caen, exploring the strategic maneuvers, the harrowing experiences of the soldiers, and the lasting impact of this monumental conflict where Canadians and the British would fight head-to-head against stubborn German resistance.
I receive the order to defend Caen. Our men of the Hitler Youth are aged 17 or 18. We, the old soldiers, have experienced the Eastern Front and face the future with anxiety. We know what is in front of us. But the young soldiers look at us with laughter in their eyes. They have no fear. I assemble all the commanders and inform them of my decision to evacuate the town of Caen. These soldiers had gone to war weeks before with fresh, blooming faces. At this point, muddy helmets cast shade on their emaciated faces, whose eyes have often looked into another world. They stagger drowsily, their ammunition hanging around their necks. We all knew that the fighting would only end with death or capture, but nobody was ready to stop fighting. The Allies' demand for unconditional surrender motivates us to continue fighting. We will not throw away our weapons because we still have to fight for our homeland. The sun beat down on us as we pushed through the outskirts of Saint-André-sur-Orne. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and gunpowder, and the sound of gunfire was constant. My heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline coursing through my veins. We had orders to take the village, but the Germans were dug in, making every inch a fight. We moved cautiously through the narrow alleys, the tension almost unbearable. Every step felt like it could be our last. As we approached the enemy position, I signaled for the men to take cover. I could see the German gunners, focused on the main road. This was our chance, I said. I took a deep breath, then signaled the attack. We rushed forward, grenades flying. The explosions were deafening, and we followed up with a barrage of rifle fire. The Germans didn't know what hit them. Within minutes, the machine gun nest was silent. It also seemed when we pushed through, every building seemed to hide a German soldier, and we had to clear them out one by one. It was tough. We lost a lot of good men.
The Allies initially set their sights on capturing Caen, one of Normandy's largest cities, on D-Day. Caen was strategically important for several reasons. Firstly, it was situated along the Orne River and Caen Canal, which could bolster a German defence if not secured. Secondly, Caen served as a key road hub, allowing for the rapid movement of German forces. Lastly, the terrain around Caen was relatively open compared to the bocage country in western Normandy, making it suitable for constructing airfields. On D-Day, Caen was designated as a critical objective for the British 3rd Infantry Division, becoming the epicentre of intense combat operations extending from June through August. Contrary to Allied expectations, the battle for Caen became a protracted engagement, lasting 2 long months due to the Germans concentrating their reserves, especially their essential armoured units, in defence of the city. This strategic focus on Caen caused the German forces confronting the American advance in the west to be thinly spread, relying on the rugged terrain of the backcountry to impede American progress. The prolonged German defence of Caen ultimately facilitated the American breakthrough to the south and east, setting the stage for the potential encirclement of German forces in Normandy from the rear. The historic city of Caen, known for its numerous medieval structures, suffered extensive destruction due to Allied bombing and intense combat during World War II. Reconstruction efforts continued until 1962, and as a result, very little of the original pre-war city exists today. On June 6, 1944, Allied forces initiated Operation Neptune, the amphibious landing phase of Operation Overlord, marking the beginning of the invasion of France. Thousands of ships, backed by around 3,000 aircraft, launched a massive assault on the Normandy beaches. Although the D-Day landings achieved their initial objectives, the Allies failed to capture Caen as originally planned. In addition to the seaborne landings, the Allies deployed airborne forces to support the invasion. The US 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions, alongside the British 6th Airborne Division and the attached 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion, were dropped behind enemy lines. British and Canadian paratroopers were tasked with Operation Deadstick, targeting the capture of strategic bridges such as Horsa and Pegasus and seizing the artillery battery at Merville to impede German advancements. These efforts led to the establishment of a crucial bridgehead north of Caen, on the east bank of the Orne River, which provided a strategic advantage for Allied troops in the subsequent battle for Caen. The first attempt to capture Caen began with the initial landings on Sword Beach by the British 3rd Infantry Division on June 6th. Although the division successfully breached the Atlantic Wall and advanced southward, they fell short of reaching Caen by 3.7 miles, failing to meet their final objectives as planned. During the afternoon, the 21st Panzer Division mounted several counterattacks, effectively blocking the road to Caen and halting the Allied advance. By June 9th, Caen remained under German control, prompting General Montgomery to devise a new strategy for the Second Army, aiming to capture the city through a pincer movement. The eastern arm of this manoeuvre involved 1st Corps' 51st Infantry Division, which was to advance from the Orne Bridge Head, established during Operation Tonga, and move southwards to Cagny, located 6 miles southeast of Caen. Meanwhile, 30th Corps would constitute the western arm of the pincer, with the 7th Armoured Division advancing east, crossing the Odon River and seizing Evrechi, along with the strategic high ground near Hill 112. In the ensuing days, 30th Corps engaged in fierce battles for control of Tilly-sur-Seulles, which was staunchly defended by the Panzer-Lehr Division and elements of the 12th SS Panzer Division. Extremely heavy battles had broken out. The Allied forces struggled to advance through the bocage terrain, which provided a formidable natural defence. Concurrently, 1st Corps faced delays in moving into position, necessitating a rescheduled attack for June 12th. When the 51st Highland Division launched their assault, they encountered intense resistance from the 21st Panzer Division, which significantly hindered their progress. By June 13th, the offensive to the east of Caen was abandoned due to the Highlanders' inability to advance. On the right flank of 30th Corps, German forces were unable to withstand the American assault and began retreating southward, creating a 7.5-mile gap in their front line. Recognizing this strategic opportunity, General Dempsey ordered the 7th Armoured Division to exploit the breach, capture the town of Villers-Bocage and strike at the flank of the Panzer Lehr Division. After 2 days of intense combat, including the Battle of Villers-Bocage, the division's position was deemed untenable on June 14th, prompting a withdrawal. The 7th Armoured Division was pulled back to be reinforced by the 33rd Armoured Brigade, which was in the process of landing and assembling within the British beachhead. Plans were made for the reinforced division to resume the offensive, but on June 19th, a severe storm hit the English Channel, causing significant disruptions to beach supply operations and forcing the abandonment of further offensives. The final significant Canadian operation in June aimed to secure high ground southwest of Caen, but yielded mixed results. 46 Royal Marine Commando, working alongside Canadian Armour and Le Régiment de la Chaudière, successfully advanced as far south as Rots. Conversely, the Queen's Own Rifles, supported by tanks from the 6th Canadian Armoured Regiment, 1st Hussars, experienced a notable failure at Le Mesnil-Patry. Consequently, the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division transitioned to a static role until the commencement of Operation Windsor in the first week of July. Operation Martlet, also known as Operation Dauntless, was initiated on June 25th as a preliminary offensive to support Operation Epsom. Executed by the 49th West Riding Infantry Division of 30th Corps, the operation aimed to secure key terrain on the flank of the intended advance. While the attack did achieve some territorial gains, adverse weather and muddy conditions significantly hampered progress. Consequently, some of the crucial high ground on the right flank of the 7th Corps' planned assault remained under German control. Following a 3-day delay caused by a severe storm in the English Channel, the 2nd Army commenced Operation Epsom on June 26th. The operation aimed to capture the high ground south of Caen, near Bretteville-sur-Lez. Led by Lieutenant General Sir Richard O'Connor, the newly arrived 7th Corps, consisting of 60,000 men, spearheaded the attack. They were supported by 736 artillery pieces, the Royal Navy, close air support, and a preliminary bombardment by 250 RAF bombers. Supported by the 31st Tank Brigade, the 15th Scottish Infantry Division made consistent progress, largely overrunning the German outpost line by the end of the first day. However, they encountered challenges in securing the flanks of their advance. Over the next 2 days of intense fighting, the division established a foothold across the River Odon and attempted to expand it by capturing strategic points around the salient, while moving up the 43rd Wessex Infantry Division. Despite these efforts, powerful counterattacks by the 1st and 2nd SS Panzer Corps forced the British to withdraw some positions across the river by June 30th. Eighth Corps advanced nearly 6 miles, but despite this progress, the Germans managed to achieve defensive success at the operational level by containing the British offensive, utilising their last available reserves. On the tactical level, the fighting remained indecisive, with neither side able to make significant progress after the initial gains. German counterattacks were repulsed, and further British advances were halted. Strategically, the Second Army retained the initiative over German forces in Normandy, thwarted a massed German counterattack against the Allied beachhead before it could be launched, and prevented German armoured forces from being redeployed against the Americans or being relieved and passed into reserve. The operation resulted in significant casualties for the Second Army, with up to 4,000 soldiers affected. The German army suffered over 3,000 casualties and had 126 tanks knocked out. The airfield at Carpiquet was originally intended to be captured on D-Day, but the plan failed. To rectify this, the Allies launched Operation Windsor to break through the heavily fortified German positions near the airfield. The mission was assigned to the 8th Canadian Infantry Brigade, reinforced by the Royal Winnipeg Rifles from the 7th Canadian Infantry Brigade. Tank support was provided by the Fort Garry Horse 10th Armoured Regiment and 3 specialist tank squadrons, including a flamethrower squadron from the 79th Armoured Division. Additional support came from the battleship HMS Rodney, 21 artillery battalions and 2 squadrons of RAF Hawker Typhoon ground attack aircraft on call. The airfield was heavily fortified with concrete shelters, machine gun towers, underground tunnels, 75mm anti-tank guns and 20mm anti-aircraft cannons. The surrounding area was further protected by minefields and barbed wire entanglements. The local partisans had provided the Canadian troops with detailed information about these defences. The Canadians successfully captured the village of Carpiquet on July 5th. In the days that followed, they faced and repelled several ferocious German counterattacks. The German forces, determined to reclaim the lost territory, launched relentless assaults involving artillery, barrages, armoured divisions, and infantry attacks. Despite the intensity of these counteroffensives, the Canadians held their ground with numerical air superiority. On July 8th, during Operation Charnwood, the Canadians undertook major assaults to secure the strategically significant airfield and nearby towns. The fighting was brutal, characterised by fierce close-quarters combat, heavy shelling, and sustained German resistance.
Caen was heavily bombed in preparation for Operation Charnwood. The city was in ruins, buildings reduced to rubble. We fought street by street, each corner a potential death trap. The Allies advanced slowly, their progress marked by fierce house-to-house fighting. I remember the constant sound of gunfire, the cries of the wounded, and the omnipresent smell of smoke and death. We were eventually forced to retreat to the southern part of the city. The British attacked with a massive number of tanks and artillery. The sky was filled with Allied planes, their bombs and bullets raining down on us. Our anti-tank guns fired continuously, and I used my Panzerfaust to knock out several enemy tanks. But there were always more. The noise was deafening, and the ground shook with each explosion. We fought desperately, but the sheer number of Allied forces was overwhelming.
The determined Canadian troops eventually overcame the German defences, securing both the airfield and the surrounding areas. Major General Rod Keller, commander of the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division, faced severe criticism for not committing 2 brigades to Operation Windsor and for delegating detailed planning to Brigadier Blackadder of the 8th Brigade. The 3rd Division's poor performance during the operation further reinforced the perception that Keller was unfit for his command. After previous operations failed to capture Caen, Montgomery decided that the next attempt would be a direct frontal assault. Although the city's strategic importance had significantly diminished since D-Day, he aimed to secure Bourg-Bousse and the commanding high ground to the south. 1st Corps, comprising 3 infantry divisions and 3 armoured brigades, was tasked with clearing German forces from the city up to the Orne River and, if possible, securing bridgeheads into southern Caen. The plan involved sending an armoured column through the city to seize the bridges, with the hope that 1st Corps could exploit the situation to advance through southern Caen toward the Verrières and Bourg-Bousse ridges, facilitating the British Second Army's push toward Falaise. New tactical methods were to be employed, including multiple waves of bombers to aid the Anglo-Canadian advance, prevent German reinforcements from reaching the battle, and boost Allied morale. Suppressing German defences was a secondary consideration. The operation would receive support from close support aircraft, the Royal Navy, and 656 artillery guns. On the night of July 7th, the first wave of bombers dropped over 2,000 short tons and 1 to 800 metric tons of bombs on Caen. At 4:30 on July 8th, 1st Corps launched their attack. Several hours later, the final wave of bombers arrived, dropping their payloads over the battlefield. By evening, the Allied forces had reached the outskirts of Caen. In response, the German command authorised the withdrawal of all heavy weapons and the remnants of the Luftwaffe division across the Orne River to the southern side of Caen. During this strategic retreat, the 12th SS Panzer Division engaged in fierce rearguard actions, attempting to delay the Allied advance. Intense fighting ensued as the Panzer Division, despite being outnumbered and facing relentless pressure, employed hit-and-run tactics and utilised the challenging terrain to their advantage. Their determined resistance, marked by close-quarters combat and artillery duels, bought critical time for the withdrawal of German forces from increasingly untenable positions. On the morning of July 9th, Anglo-Canadian patrols began infiltrating Caen, and Carpiquet airfield finally fell into Allied hands when it was discovered that the 12th SS Panzer Division had withdrawn during the night. By noon, Allied infantry had reached the northern bank of the Orne River, virtually destroying the 16th Luftwaffe Field Division in the process. By late afternoon, the northern half of Caen was firmly under Allied control. Although some bridges remained intact, they were blocked by rubble or defended by German troops on the southern side of the river. The debris-clogged streets made it nearly impossible for British armour to manoeuvre, preventing the Second Army from capitalising on the First Corps' success. Without control of the terrain flanking the south of the city, no further advances could be made within Caen. Consequently, by mid-afternoon on July 9th, Operation Charnwood was concluded. The consensus is that the operation was a tactical success, although it fell short of its full potential. It is also regarded as one of the most challenging operations of the Normandy campaign. Lieutenant General Richard O'Connor made another attempt to develop the bridgehead with Caen by launching Operation Jupiter on July 10th, aiming to retake Hill 112. The 43rd Wessex Infantry Division was tasked with capturing Hill 112, Fontaine and Etterville in the first phase, and then using Hill 112 as a defensive position to advance toward Malteau in the second phase. The Allied attack was preceded by a bombardment of mortars and over 100 field artillery pieces. The Germans, however, were well prepared, with 5 infantry battalions, 2 Tiger heavy tank battalions, 2 Sturmgeschütz companies, and Nebelwerfer rocket launchers, primarily from the 10th SS Panzer Division, with elements of the 9th SS and 12th SS Panzer Divisions in reserve. Despite the intensive preparation, the operation ultimately failed to achieve all its objectives due to the strong resistance from the entrenched German forces. The 43rd Wessex Infantry Division in particular suffered over 2,000 casualties during the operation. The Germans, utilising well-prepared defensive positions and their intimate knowledge of the terrain, inflicted heavy losses on the advancing Allied troops. The combination of determined infantry defences, effective use of artillery, and strategic withdrawal tactics by the German forces blunted the Allied assault. The 43rd Division's advance was repeatedly stalled by minefields, sniper fire, and fierce counterattacks from the German defenders. Despite their bravery and determination, the British troops were unable to fully overcome the fortified positions, leading to a high number of casualties. The failure to secure key strategic points and the inability to manoeuvre effectively in the rubble-strewn streets of Caen underscored the difficulties of urban warfare against a well-prepared enemy. At a meeting with General Bernard Montgomery on 10th July, the commander of the Second Army, Lieutenant General Miles Dempsey, suggested the plan for Operation Goodwood on the same day Montgomery had approved Operation Cobra. The Canadian part of Operation Goodwood was given the codename Operation Atlantic. Since the middle of July, 2,250 medium and 400 light tanks in 3 armoured divisions and several independent armoured brigades had been brought to Normandy under the control of the Second Army, which was now in a position where they could afford to lose tanks but not men in order to break through the German positions on the eastern side of the Orne and in the north of Caen. Operation Goodwood was to begin on 18th of July, 2 days before the beginning of the US Operation Cobra. Cobra, however, did not begin until 25 July. Although heavy losses were expected in the operation, Dempsey believed his men had a good chance to break through. The armoured divisions of the 7th Corps under the command of Lieutenant General O'Connor were to make the main effort. Approximately 700 guns shooting about 250,000 rounds were to support the attack. Furthermore, the RAF was to bombard 3 targets: Colombelles-Mondeville, Touffreville, Émieville and Cagny. The goal was to capture all of Brasse, Hubert-Folly, Verrières, Fontenay, Garcelles-Secqueville, Cagny and Vimont. A further goal was to push the Germans back from the Bourguebus ridge. The Canadian forces had the task of securing the western flank, and the British infantry were to secure the eastern. On July 18, 1944, Allied bombers and fighters targeted 5 villages on the eastern end of Caen to facilitate Operation Goodwood. Dawn attacks, aided by favourable weather, saw 4 targets marked by pathfinders, while bombardiers used alternative methods for the 5th. Supported by American bombers and fighters, the British dropped approximately 6,800 short tons, 6,200 metric tons of bombs on the villages and surrounding areas. This heavy bombing significantly impacted 2 German units: the 16th Luftwaffe Field Division and the 21st Panzer Division. Despite the intense bombardment, German air defences and ground troops managed to shoot down 6 aircraft. To reach their line of departure, the 3 Allied armoured divisions had to overcome water obstacles and a minefield. The Orne River and the Caen Canal posed significant challenges, with only 6 small bridges available for 8,000 vehicles, including tanks, artillery, motorised infantry, engineers and supply vehicles, leading to inevitable traffic congestion. Dempsey's nearly fatal solution was to have O'Connor leave the infantry, engineers and artillery on the other side until all tanks had crossed, effectively breaking up the British combined arms team before engaging the Germans. After crossing the bridges, the British forces encountered a recently laid minefield of anti-tank and anti-personnel mines by the 51st Highland Division. Clearing this obstacle required a massive engineering effort before the battle. Although there were concerns that the Germans, observing from the chimneys of the steel plant in Colombelles, would be forewarned of the attack, tactical surprise had already been lost. Engineers from the 51st Highland Division spent the 2 nights before the battle clearing 17 corridors through the minefield. 7th Corps lost the element of surprise as their tanks were delayed by bridges and minefields. Through rare aerial reconnaissance and observations from Courcelles, the Germans had ample time to fortify their defences. Historian Anthony Beevor argues that more effort should have been made to clear additional lanes through the minefields. However, the engineering resources of 2nd Army, I and V8 Corps and divisional engineers were already heavily engaged from July 13th to the evening of July 16th, constructing 6 new roads from west of the Orne River to the start lines east of the river and canal. Additionally, I Corps engineers were building new bridges across the Orne River and Caen Canal and reinforcing existing ones in preparation for the attack. Engineers from the 3rd and 51st Divisions were tasked with clearing the minefield, successfully creating 19 40-foot wide gaps by the morning of July 18th. After Operation Goodwood, it took the Royal Engineers 5 days of daylight work to remove all the mines from the positions previously held by the 51st Highland Infantry Division. Fire support during the operation was notably ineffective, as artillery regiments were kept west of the Orne according to Dempsey's orders, leaving them out of range of the main German defences at Bourguebus Ridge. This lack of coordination between the field artillery and the tanks further compounded the difficulties faced by the Allies. The area chosen for the attack was also strategically poor, riddled with small villages, each harbouring a German garrison connected by tunnels and observation posts, which allowed the Germans to monitor Allied movements closely. The German artillery positioned on Bourguebus Ridge at Cagny and Émieville remained unscathed by prior air or artillery attacks. From these vantage points, the German guns, along with the 16th Luftwaffe Field Division entrenched on the ridge, enjoyed unobstructed fields of fire. Behind the ridge, the remnants of the 21st Panzer Division, equipped with 78 88mm guns and 40 tanks, stood ready. This formidable defence made the Allied advance exceedingly challenging and underscored the strategic missteps of the operation. The Second Army compounded its troubles by overtasking the 11th Armoured Division. Although leading the attack, the division was also responsible for clearing the small villages along the front lines, such as Couvreville and Demouville. This dual tasking slowed the advance and disrupted coordination, as armoured brigades moved on Bourg-Bousse Ridge while motorised infantry brigades dealt with the villages. Consequently, the 7th Corps' progress was sluggish, despite the 29th Armoured Brigade of the 11th Armoured Division capturing nearly 7 miles of territory. By 9:30, upon reaching the railroad at Vimont, the German forces had recovered from the initial bombardment and destroyed 12 British tanks with an 88mm gun. The British advance remained slow as they crossed the rail line to face the fortified Bourg-Bousse Ridge, held by the 21st Panzer Division, the 1st SS Panzer Division, and numerous artillery units. For most of the day, on July 18th, the 29th Armoured Brigade of the 11th Armoured Division lacked artillery support. The 159th Infantry Brigade was preoccupied with clearing 2 villages behind the 29th Armoured Brigade, while the remaining 2 armoured divisions were busy crossing the bridges or navigating the minefields. At dawn, only 1 tank battalion of the 7th Armoured Division was engaged in combat, with most of the remaining armoured units having to wait until 10 AM to midday to cross the Orne River. Tank battalions ended up fighting individually and in succession rather than as a coordinated unit, contrary to the initial plan. Most of the ground gained occurred in the morning. On the right flank, the Canadian 3rd Infantry Division advanced through southern Caen. The Germans launched a counterattack after midday on July 18th, which continued fiercely until July 20th. Intense fighting ensued, with both sides incurring heavy casualties. Tanks clashed in brutal confrontations. Creating a chaotic and deadly environment. At this point, neither side was taking prisoners. It was brutal, with instances of German grenadiers shooting captured Canadians and Canadians shooting captured Germans on the spot. Both sides were fighting like absolute hell at this point. Despite the fierce resistance, Allied forces managed to hold their ground, utilising superior air support and strategic manoeuvres. By July 20th, General Montgomery, assessing the situation and the deteriorating weather conditions, decided to conclude the operation. The decision was influenced by the increasing difficulty in maintaining supply lines and the adverse impact of the weather on air and ground operations. Matter of fact, the operation did not proceed as planned for the Allies. Historian Simon True reports approximately 4,000 casualties for the Second Army, while Chester Wilmot cites 4,937 casualties. But what made Caen so brutal? There were even similarities to the Eastern Front. Caen was particularly brutal due to the combination of fierce German resistance, strategic importance of the city, and the challenging terrain. Caen was a key objective for the Allies because it was a major road hub, and its capture was crucial for securing the Normandy beachhead and enabling further advances into France. The Germans, recognizing its significance, heavily fortified the city and concentrated their best armoured and elite divisions, including the 21st Panzer Division and elements of the 12th SS Panzer Divisions, to defend it with brutal resolve. This resulted in prolonged and intense fighting, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. Additionally, the urban environment of Caen, combined with the surrounding Bocage countryside, created a difficult and deadly battlefield. The Allies had to conduct numerous large-scale operations, as we stated earlier, such as Operations Epsom, Charnwood and Goodwood, involving massive bombardments and close-quarters combat, which devastated the city and inflicted significant civilian and military casualties. The Germans were desperate at Caen to hold at all costs. Tank losses remain debated. Michael Reynolds' analysis suggests a maximum loss of 253 tanks during Operation Goodwood, most of which were repairable. True indicates around 334 tanks were lost, asserting that a thorough investigation shows 7th Corps lost 314 tanks, with only 140 completely destroyed. Although the operation failed to achieve a breakout, it met crucial strategic objectives. The Allies captured vital new ground, including parts of Caen that were now 4 to 5 kilometers behind Allied lines. Importantly, the operation also tied down 4 German corps, including key armoured divisions, just as the Americans were preparing to launch Operation Cobra. Before the invasion, Caen had a population of 60,000. On June 6th, Allied aircraft dropped leaflets urging the population to disperse into the countryside, but only a few hundred heeded the warning. Later that day, British heavy bombers attacked the city to slow the flow of German reinforcements, resulting in massive destruction. In the 48 hours following the invasion, 800 civilians lost their lives, streets were blocked by rubble, and ambulances could not get through. The injured were taken to an emergency hospital set up in the Bon Sauveur convent, which was itself damaged. Notable buildings, including the Palais des Ducs, the Church of Saint-Étienne, and the railway station, were all destroyed or severely damaged. To escape the bombardment, 15,000 people took refuge for more than a month in tunnels to the south of the city, created by medieval stone quarrying. The Défense Passive organisation, based at Bon Sauveur, coordinated civil defence and medical relief efforts effectively. Caen's medical profession was highly praised for its response. 6 surgical teams were alerted on the morning of the invasion, and police collected medical supplies from pharmacies and clinics, bringing them to Bon Sauveur and subsidiary hospitals at the Lycée Malherbe and the Hospice des Petites Sœurs des Pauvres. On June 9th, a shell fired by the battleship HMS Rodney destroyed a major city landmark, the bell tower of Saint-Pierre. Many buildings burned and molten lead dripped from roofs. The continuous bombing exhausted medical teams. Over 3,000 people took refuge in Bon Sauveur, in the Abbaye aux Hommes, with more in Saint-Étienne Church. Foraging parties were sent into the countryside for food, and old wells were reopened. The 500 refugees at the convent of the Petites Sœurs des Pauvres were well supplied, but conditions in the rest of the city were dire. The Vichy government in Paris managed to get some supplies through to Caen under the auspices of Secours National, totaling 250 short tons. On July 6th, the Germans ordered all remaining civilians to leave. By the evening of July 7th, when Caen was bombed again in preparation for Operation Charnwood, only 15,000 inhabitants remained. In this raid, 467 Lancaster and Halifax bombers targeted the northern edge, but massive damage was inflicted on the city centre. At least 2 civilian shelters were destroyed by direct hits, and the university was destroyed. 350 people were killed in this raid and the ensuing fighting on July the 8th, bringing the civilian death toll to 1,150 since D-Day. The Germans withdrew from the city north of the Orne on July 9th, blowing the only remaining bridge. The southern part of the city was not liberated until July 18th, when the Canadian 3rd Division advanced through it as part of Operation Goodwood. By the end of the battle, Caen's population had fallen from 60,000 to 17,000, and the city's destruction caused much resentment, truly a forgotten tragedy, and it's something that has been largely forgotten. Operation Overlord and the battles in Normandy successfully established a crucial foothold for the Allies in France, paving the way for the liberation of Western Europe. This momentum culminated in the Allies recapturing the French capital, Paris, on August 25th. Caen and many surrounding towns and villages were largely destroyed during the conflict. Both the cathedral in Caen and the University of Caen, founded in 1432, were razed to the ground. These buildings were eventually rebuilt and even expanded after the war, leading to the phoenix becoming the symbol of the University of Caen. The Allied bombing rendered approximately 35,000 citizens of Caen homeless. After the war, the West German government was required to pay reparations to compensate civilians in Caen who were killed, starved, or left homeless due to Allied bombing and combat. The rebuilding of Caen officially spanned from 1948 to 1962. On June 6, 2004, Gerhard Schröder became the first German Chancellor invited to the anniversary celebration of the invasion. Numerous monuments commemorate the battle for Caen and Operation Overlord. For instance, there is a memorial for the 15th Scottish Infantry Division on the road to the Odon Bridge at Tourmoville. Hill 112 features monuments for both the 53rd Welsh Infantry Division and the 43rd Wessex Infantry Division. Additionally, a forest was planted near Hill 112 to honour those who fought there. The landings at Normandy, the Battle for Caen and the Second World War are commemorated today through numerous memorials. In Caen, the Mémorial de Caen, which includes a peace museum, Musée de la Paix, stands as a prominent tribute. This museum was constructed by the city of Caen, atop the former bunker of General Wilhelm Richter, the commander of the 716th Infantry Division. On June 6, 1988, the museum was inaugurated by then French President François Mitterrand, along with 12 ambassadors from countries involved in the Normandy fighting. The fallen soldiers of the Battle for Caen and surrounding areas are interred in several war cemeteries. These include the Bruay War Cemetery, the Banneville-la-Campagne War Cemetery, the Beny-sur-Mer Canadian War Cemetery, the Bretteville-sur-Lez Canadian War Cemetery, and the La Cambre German War Cemetery, among others. And that brings my video to a close. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the Battle of Caen, a truly epic battle. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe for more content. Your support recently has been amazing. Don't forget to check out my Patreon for additional content. Your continued support on Patreon means a lot to me. I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye for now.